Kellan Carter, table 5 needs water and the kid just dropped a fork again. The shout came from behind the kitchen doors, but Kellan was already halfway there, sweat clinging to the back of his neck as he maneuvered through the lunch rush chaos of the griddle house. He wasn't supposed to be here. Not today, not even as a fill-in. He was a mechanic barely hanging on to that title after getting laid off last week. But when his best friend Marco called him in a panic this morning begging him to cover a shift because he'd gotten food poisoning, Kellan didn't think twice. He needed the extra cash. His 6-year-old daughter, Zadie, had outgrown her sneakers again, and rent was due in 4 days. "Here you go, little man," Kellan said with a tired but genuine smile as he bent down to hand the fork to the boy at table 5. The boy grinned, ketchup smeared across his cheeks. But Kellan's attention shifted as his gaze lifted to the woman sitting across from the child. She was stunning, not in the usual I spend hours on Instagram way. She looked composed, sharp. Her long dark hair was pulled back into a sleek ponytail, and she wore a navy pantsuit with heels that looked like they cost more than his entire week's pay. But it was her eyes that caught him, cool, observant, and clearly watching him. "Thank you," the woman said, her voice warm but firm. "You're not the usual waiter here, are you?" Kellan straightened, gripping the water pitcher a little tighter. "Just covering for a friend. He's sick." She nodded slowly, then glanced at the boy. "Zion, remember what I said about eating fries before your lunch?" "I'm hungry now," the little boy grumbled. "You'll still be hungry in 5 minutes," she replied, then caught Kellan smiling at the exchange. "Kids," she murmured, half apologetic. "I get it," Kellan said. "I've got a daughter, 6. She's a tornado with curls." The woman's lips curled into a smile. "Sounds like a handful." "The best kind," he said without thinking. She tilted her head, studying him more closely. Something about the way he spoke, the ease in his voice, it made her sit back a little, intrigued. "I'll have the Cobb salad, no bacon. Dressing on the side," she said, handing him the menu. Kellan nodded, "And for Zion?" "Grilled cheese and apple slices, please." "You got it." As he turned to walk away, he could still feel her eyes on him. Back in the kitchen, Kellan rubbed a towel over the back of his neck, trying to cool down. The place was packed, the AC was barely working, and he hadn't taken a break in 3 hours. "She's still watching you, man," one of the cooks muttered, nudging him. Kellan glanced through the pass-through window. The woman, whoever she was, kept checking her watch and glancing toward the kitchen. He frowned. "She say anything?" "Nope, but she paid already, left a huge tip, and asked for your name." Kellan blinked. "Wait, what?" The cook shrugged. "Told her it was your first day. She said she knew." Later that night, after putting Zadie to bed after bath time, after brushing her hair, after reading her favorite story twice, Kellan finally sat down at the tiny kitchen table of their 2-bedroom apartment and opened the note the hostess had given him just before he left. It was written on a business card. Jessa Nolan, CEO, Nolan and Hartwell Media Group. "You were great today. Ever consider doing something different?" He stared at it for a long time. The words felt surreal, like a joke. What would a CEO want with a guy who just spent the day wiping ketchup off chairs? Jessa leaned back in the backseat of her black town car, Zion asleep beside her with his head on her shoulder. She stared at her phone, rereading the restaurant's website. There was no mention of the man who served her, no full names on staff. She didn't know why she'd asked for his name, or why she couldn't stop thinking about that smile, the way his voice softened when he mentioned his daughter, or the way he didn't flinch when she looked him in the eye. Most people did. They knew who she was. They treated her like a title. But he hadn't. He didn't even know who she was. For the first time in a long time, that felt refreshing. The next morning, Kellan was back under the hood of a car in his building's shared garage, using borrowed tools and praying the transmission would hold just long enough to get him paid. Zadie sat on a crate nearby, coloring in a book. "Daddy, who was that lady yesterday?" He looked up, wiping his hands on a rag. "Just a customer. Why?" "She looked at you like you were a prince." Kellan laughed. "I think you're mixing me up with someone from your cartoons." "Nope," Zadie said seriously, tapping her crayon on her lip. "She liked you." "I served her salad, kiddo." "She still liked you." He shook his head, but his fingers drifted to the card in his pocket. 3 days later, he saw her again. It was at a sidewalk cafe near Midtown. He was returning a borrowed toolkit to a friend when he spotted her. Jessa, sitting alone with a coffee and her laptop, phone to her ear, speaking fast and firm. He hesitated. "Walk away." But then she looked up and smiled. "Hey," she said, ending the call. "Kellan, right?" He blinked. "You remember." "I don't forget people who treat me like a person instead of a job title." He chuckled. "You mean you don't get guys handing you forks and wiping down sticky tables often?" "Not exactly." She closed her laptop. "Sit." "I didn't mean to interrupt." "You didn't." He sat slowly. "I wanted to thank you," she said. "That day at the diner, you were kind, real, my son needed that, and so did I." He looked at her, really looked this time. Her eyes weren't cold, they were tired, but kind. "I was just doing the job." "No," she said softly, "you were being you." Kellan didn't know what to say to that, so he said the first thing that came into his head. "Wanna get dinner sometime?" Jessa's eyes widened, but then her smile grew. "I'd like that." And just like that, something shifted. Neither of them realized it, yet but that moment, on a busy sidewalk with traffic blaring and time rushing past, was the start of everything. "You're late," Marco muttered, elbow deep in a sink full of dishes. "Not that I'm mad, just thought you were ghosting the diner for good." Kellan tossed his work gloves onto the hook behind the prep counter. "Wasn't planning to come in. Then, I got a message from Lanny saying you were short again." Marco tilted his head. "Wait, you actually answered Lanny's text? Who are you and what have you done with my best friend?" "I owed you," Kellan said, pulling an apron over his hoodie. "Besides, Zadie's with my neighbor for the afternoon and could use the extra shift." Marco leaned against the sink, eyeing him. "You're not here because of her." Kellan paused. "Who?" "That woman from the other day, the one in the suit." "I don't even know her last name." "You've been humming all morning, man. You hum when you're thinking about someone." "I hum when I'm sleep deprived." "Right." Kellan didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed the order pad and headed toward table 7. The place was quiet, the lunch rush still an hour off. He was halfway to the table when the bell above the door chimed. He didn't need to look up to know it was her. He recognized the shift in the air. The same way he could hear Zadie's laugh across a playground. Some people carried their energy like that. Jessa walked in like she didn't belong in a place with chipped linoleum floors and a flickering light above the counter, but she didn't seem to care. She wore a cream blouse tucked into tailored black pants, hair in a low twist, and a watch that probably cost more than Kellan's car. She scanned the room, found him, and walked over without hesitation. "You work weekends now?" she asked. "Apparently," he replied. "You following me?" "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe I was on my way to a client meeting and remembered the grilled cheese here was surprisingly good." He raised an eyebrow. "No kid with you today." "Zion's at piano. Have an hour to myself, so I figured I'd spend it with the only man who's ever handed me a fork like it was a gift." He laughed, nodding toward the counter. "Take a seat. I'll make sure the grilled cheese is exactly how he likes it. She slid onto the stool. I'm not picky, not when I'm off duty. You have an off duties. I'm trying. As he placed her order, Jessa rested her chin on her hand, watching him move behind the counter. He was focused, casual, like he belonged there even if he didn't. The way he spoke to the older couple at the corner booth, how he refilled their coffee without asking, how he bent to pick up a pen the teenage busboy dropped, none of it was forced. When he returned, he leaned on the counter. So what does a CEO do on her day off, besides stock diners? She smiled. You remembered I'm a CEO. You handed me a card the size of a mini billboard. Hard to forget. I was hoping you'd call. I was hoping I wouldn't need to. She looked at him for a moment. You're not like most people I meet. You mean I don't talk in spreadsheets? I mean you don't pretend. And that's rare. Painfully. He folded his arms. Why do you keep showing up here? Jessa didn't answer right away. She glanced at the window, then back at him. Because the last time I sat here, I felt like I could breathe. Because I'm tired of rooms full of people who smile at my title and not at me. And because I thought maybe, if I came back, you'd ask me out again. Kellan leaned in slightly. Already did, you said yes. You never followed up. I didn't have your number. She reached into her bag, scribbled something on the back of a receipt, and slid it across the counter. Now you do. He looked at the number, then at her. You free tonight? Depends. Is this going to be a real date or another lunch with grilled cheese and a side of existential honesty? I was thinking something better. There's a carnival across the bridge. Zadie's been begging to go, and I hate cotton candy. You could come, help me suffer through it. You're inviting me on a date with your daughter, she asked. I don't do babysitters, and I don't do fake. You game. Jessa looked down at her phone calendar, then back at him. Send me the time. That night, just after sunset, Kellan stood outside the entrance to the fairground, holding Zadie's small hand. She wore a pink hoodie and had her face painted like a tiger, bouncing on her toes as the lights of the Ferris wheel blinked overhead. You think she's coming? Zadie asked. I think so. She's fancy. What if she doesn't like rides? She'll be fine. What if she doesn't like me? Kellan knelt beside her. No one who meets you doesn't like you. Jessa arrived 5 minutes later. She wore jeans and white sneakers, a soft navy jacket zipped up to her collarbone. Her hair was loose this time, a soft wave falling down her back. Hi, she said, looking at Zadie. You must be the tornado. Zadie grinned. I'm a tiger today. Well, Jessa said, lowering to eye level. I brought gummy bears in case tigers get hungry. Zadie looked at her dad. She's cool. Kellan laughed. Told you. As they walked through the fairgrounds, Kellan watched them talk. Jessa asked Zadie about her school project, let her drag her toward the carousel, even joined them in a bumper car. Later, while Zadie climbed into a mini roller coaster, Jessa pulled Kellan aside. She's amazing, she said. She's my whole world. You're doing it all alone. Not by choice, but yeah. Jessa looked up at him. What happened? Kellan hesitated. Zadie's mom left when she was 3, said she wasn't built for it. I didn't try to stop her. You don't talk about it much, do you? People don't usually ask. I'm asking. He met her eyes. It was hard, still is, but it got used to hard. You shouldn't have to. Maybe not, but I'm good at surviving. She reached for his hand. Maybe you should try living too. He didn't answer, but he didn't pull away either. As Zadie ran back toward them, cheeks flushed, hair wild, Kellan realized something he hadn't let himself think in years. He actually wanted someone here, not just for tonight, not just for help. He wanted her, in all the ways that counted. And that scared him more than anything. Zadie's laughter rang through the apartment as Kellan tried to wrestle a ponytail into her hair, failing for the third time. "You're twisting it too much," she said, reaching up to grab the elastic from his hand. "Then maybe you should do it," he muttered, dropping the brush in defeat. "I would, but you said, had to look fancy for the dinner." Kellan sighed, tugging at the collar of his only ironed shirt. "I just meant neat, not like ball-gown fancy." "Miss Jessa said, we're going to a hotel with chandeliers." "I said she had a meeting there. We're meeting her after." Zadie narrowed her eyes. "So, do I have to eat shrimp?" "Absolutely not." She grinned. "Good." He checked the time. Jessa had called earlier, inviting them both to join her at a charity event she was attending for work. Nothing black tie, she'd said, just something with real food and a few too many cameras. Kellan didn't love the idea. He didn't own the kind of clothes people wore to charity events, but she'd sounded hopeful. And after the carnival, he couldn't shake the feeling that he wanted to be wherever she was, even if it meant standing in a room full of people who probably thought oil. By the time they arrived at the downtown hotel, its wide marble lobby glowing under soft golden lights, Kellan had already adjusted his collar 4 times. Zadie clutched his hand tightly, eyes wide as she stared at the flower arrangements and glittering ice sculpture in the center of the ballroom. "Do we have to bow or something?" she whispered. "I think we're good," he murmured back. Jessa appeared near the entrance, her wine-colored dress elegant but simple, her heels clicking softly against the floor. She looked like she belonged there, like she could command the room without saying a word. "You made it," she said, eyes bright. "I wasn't sure we should." "I'm glad you did." Zadie ran up to hug her, and Jessa knelt to return it without hesitation. "I've never been somewhere with a piano that plays itself," Zadie said in awe. Jessa laughed. "Well, you're in luck. Saved us a table near the dessert bar." Kellan followed her through the ballroom, trying to ignore the stares from a few sharply dressed couples nearby. Someone whispered something behind a champagne flute, and he caught the shift in Jessa's posture. "Let me guess," he said quietly. "They're not used to seeing you with a guy who smells like motor oil." "They're not used to seeing me with anyone." Once they reached the table, Jessa leaned in. "You okay?" "I've been in worse rooms." "Name one." "A parent-teacher conference where Zadie told the teacher, used to live in a van." Jessa laughed, her hand brushing his under the table. "Did you?" "Only for 2 weeks. Long story." "I want to hear it later." Soon, a woman in a silver dress approached. "Jessa, I didn't know you'd be bringing guests." Jessa stood calmly, her expression unreadable. "This is Kellan and his daughter Zadie. They're friends." The woman's gaze flicked over them, lingering a fraction too long. "That's lovely." Kellan reached for Zadie's shoulder, guiding her closer. "Nice to meet you." The woman offered a tight smile and turned away. "Friend of yours?" he asked once she was out of earshot. "Board member, she's harmless, just allergic to anything unscripted." "I'm guessing I'm unscripted." "You're the part I look forward to." Later, as a jazz trio played near the stage and servers in white gloves passed out miniature sliders, Jessa led him onto a balcony overlooking the city. The air was cool, and the noise of the ballroom faded behind the glass doors. "I haven't thanked you," she said, resting her hands on the railing. "For what?" "For showing up, for not letting this scare you off." He leaned beside her, watching the lights below. "It did. I just came anyway." She looked at him. "Why?" "Because I wanted to see if this was real." "And?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. He turned toward her. It is. Jessa's breath caught slightly. You know, I'm not used to this, to having someone look at me like they don't want anything. I'm not here for what you have. I'm here because you make my kid laugh, because you don't flinch when I tell the truth, and because when you walked into that diner, something changed. She stepped closer. Do you know how long it's been since I've trusted someone enough to say how I really feel? You don't have to say it yet. I want to. He waited. I don't know what this is going to turn into, but I know I don't want it to end here. He nodded once, neither do I. She kissed him then, gently, her hand slipping behind his neck. It wasn't rushed or tentative. It was quiet, certain, like the kind of promise that didn't need words. Back inside, Zadie sat curled in a plush chair beside the chocolate fountain, chatting animatedly with a man in a tuxedo who seemed more amused than annoyed. Kellan gave a low chuckle. She's holding court. That's my girl, Jessa said with a grin. He looked at her, really looked, and something inside him settled. He wasn't supposed to be here, but somehow, this moment felt like exactly where he belonged. The apartment was quiet, except for the low hum of the dishwasher and the soft breathing of Zadie fast asleep on the couch beneath a fleece blanket patterned with cartoon animals. Kellan sat at the small dining table, elbows resting on the wood, phone in hand. The glow from the screen lit his face as he reread the last message Jessa had sent before her flight. He still wasn't used to this part, the space between moments with her. The ones filled with real-life Zadie's school pickup, the bills that stacked too fast, the cracked tile in the bathroom he kept swearing he'd fix. But she'd asked him to wait for her. Just 48 hours in Los Angeles, a quick investor meeting, and then she'd be back. What surprised him most wasn't that she kept her word, it was how much he trusted that she would. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. He stood, stretching tired muscles, and opened it to reveal Marco holding a foil-covered tray. Chicken enchiladas, Marco announced, holding it up like a trophy. My mom made extra. Kellan stepped aside, letting him in. You didn't have to. I know, Marco said, setting the tray on the stove. But I figured you could use a meal that didn't involve boxed pasta and regret. Kellan gave a half laugh. Zadie's been on a peanut butter and jelly streak. Think she's staging a protest. Marco leaned against the counter, eyeing him. So, how serious is it? Kellan didn't need to ask what he meant. I don't know, different, real. Marco nodded slowly. You're not the guy who gets swept up in things. I'm not swept, Kellan said quietly. I'm just, finally standing still long enough to figure out what I want. And what's that? Her, Kellan said simply. But not just her, the life that comes with her. Not the money, not the job titles just. The balance, the way she sees me, the way she sees Zadie. Marco didn't answer right away. Then he said, You're scared. Of course I'm scared. Then maybe that's how you know it's real. The next afternoon, Kellan arrived at the airport nearly 40 minutes early, Zadie skipping beside him in a denim jacket covered in iron on patches. She held a bundle of tulips in one hand and a homemade sign in the other paper slightly crumpled, the words, Welcome back, Miss Jessa, written in glittery marker. He hadn't suggested the sign, that had been all Zadie. They stood near the escalators, watching passengers descend in waves. Zadie kept bouncing on her toes, spotting people who weren't her, then shaking her head. When Jessa finally appeared, wheeling a sleek black carry-on, her eyes scanned the crowd until they landed on them. Zadie ran first. Jessa crouched, catching her in a hug that nearly knocked her bag over. I missed you, Zadie said against her shoulder. I missed you more, Jessa whispered back. Kellan stepped forward as she rose, brushing a strand of hair from her face. You're early, she said, smiling. I didn't want to be late. She glanced at the flowers, then at the sign. You two are dangerous. I could get used to this. That's the idea, Kellan said. They drove back toward the city with the windows down, the spring air soft and cool. Zadie fell asleep in the back seat, Tulip still clutched in her lap. As they pulled into the parking lot, Jessa reached for his hand. I need to tell you something. Kellan parked and turned toward her, the dashboard lights casting shadows across her face. I've been offered a position in London, a full expansion director role. His chest tightened. That's. I haven't said yes. He didn't speak. I've been thinking about what matters, she continued. Not just work or the next title, but what fills the quiet moments, what makes me feel like myself. And she looked at him fully. You do, and Zadie, and the way you both make me laugh when I forget how. He exhaled slowly. So what does that mean? It means I turned it down. His head snapped up. You what? I told them I'd stay, that I was building something more important here. He stared at her, heart thudding. You did that for us. I did that for me, she said, because I think I've finally found a life don't want to leave. A week later, Kellan stood nervously outside the glass doors of Nolan and Hartwell's headquarters, wearing a new jacket Jessa had bought him on a whim. She said he needed a jacket that made people look twice. He adjusted the collar and stepped inside. The receptionist smiled. Mr. Carter, they're expecting you. He walked past the marble floors, past the open plan offices, into a corner conference room where Jessa waited, flanked by 2 members of her executive team. She stood, clasping her hands. Everyone, this is Kellan Carter. He'll be consulting on our new community outreach program, starting with the city's after-school mechanical training initiative. Kellan blinked. Wait, I thought I was just here to talk about the garage space. You are, she said, but I had a better idea. You said you hated watching kids get left behind, so pulled some strings. We're funding a full program. You'll run it. He turned to her, stunned. You believe in me that much? I love you that much, she said softly. The room faded around them. Later that night, in the middle of their living room, Kellan knelt beside Zadie as she played with her toy cars. Guess what? He said. What? She asked, eyes wide. I'm going to be working with kids like you, teaching them how to fix real cars. Will I get to come? You'll be my assistant. She beamed, then narrowed her eyes. Do assistants get snacks? Only if they don't crash the toy cars into the couch. Outside, the city lights shimmered. Inside, Kellan looked across the room at Jessa, curled on the couch in sock-covered feet, reading aloud from a brochure about the community center they'd be revamping together. And for the first time in years, he wasn't surviving. He was living. With her. Kellan stood in the center of the new garage space, the scent of fresh paint lingering in the air. Rows of polished red tool chests lined one wall, and overhead lights glowed warm against the metal workbenches. It had taken weeks to transform the abandoned lot into something functional, but now it felt alive. Real. Like a future he could reach out and touch. Outside, a yellow school bus pulled up to the curb, the hiss of its brakes echoing through the alley. The doors opened, and a stream of teenagers poured out, their chatter loud, their energy electric. Some looked curious, others skeptical. A few kept their arms crossed tight, as if bracing for disappointment. Jessa stepped beside him, clipboard in hand, her blazer rolled at the sleeves. They look terrified, she said, watching the group. They'll be fine once they get oil on their hands, Kellan replied. No one stays stiff after learning how to torque a bolt. I'll hold you to that, she said, then leaned closer. You ready for this? He glanced at the students, then back at her. I was born ready, just didn't know it until now. They split up, Jessa greeting parents and program reps near the entrance while Kellan guided the teens inside, introducing them to the space, explaining what they'd build. One boy asked about engines. Another girl pointed at the welding corner with interest. By the end of the hour, the atmosphere had shifted. They weren't stiff anymore. They were engaged. As the last of the group headed back to the bus, Jessa returned, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "That girl with the braid?" She asked about internships. Kellan grinned. "She's got good questions, already thinking like a mechanic." "She reminded me of you," Jessa said, "except with better posture." "Low blow," he said, nudging her lightly. "You're incredible with them. They just need someone to see them." She looked at him for a long moment. "You don't realize how much you've built, do you?" "I didn't do this alone." "No, but you believed in it. You made it happen." He reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "You gave me the chance." "I gave you a door," she said. "You walked through it." The next week, they hosted their first family workshop. Parents worked alongside their kids, learning how to change brake pads, rotate tires. Zadie stood at the welcome table, handing out safety goggles like they were party favors, completely in her element. After the last family left, Jessa found Kellan in the back room, wiping grease from his hands. "You're filthy," she said, brushing a finger along his jaw. "Occupational hazard." She tilted her head. "I've been thinking." "Dangerous," he teased. "I want to buy the building next door." He blinked. "What for?" "A study lounge, a quiet space for tutoring, somewhere they can go after the shop closes." He stared at her. "You're serious?" "I'm very serious, and I want you to help design it." He didn't answer right away. Then he stepped forward, cupping her face. "How did I get lucky enough to meet you?" "You were handing out forks, remember?" she said, lips curving. "You changed everything." "So did you," she whispered. He kissed her then, slow and certain, the kind of kiss that said yes to more than just another project. Yes to whatever came next. Months passed in a rhythm that felt like music. Zadie started second grade and begged to bring Miss Jessa to career day. The program expanded, adding evening sessions and mentorships. Kellan hired 2 former students as assistants. The garage buzzed with progress. One cool Sunday morning, Kellan stood on the rooftop of their apartment building, a blanket spread over the concrete, a thermos of hot chocolate beside him. Zadie was inside with Marco, who'd been bribed with leftover lasagna to babysit for a few hours. Jessa stepped out of the stairwell wearing one of his hoodies and thick socks, her hair still damp from her shower. "You said you had a surprise," she said, wrapping her arms around herself. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box. She froze. "I know we didn't meet in a way most people would call perfect," he said, "and I don't have a mansion or a yacht or any of that flashy stuff." Her eyes didn't waver. "But I have a life I never thought I'd get, and it's because of you. You believed in me before I knew how to believe in myself. You gave my daughter more than kindness, you gave her someone to look up to." He opened the box. Inside was a slim silver band, simple and elegant. "I don't need a big ceremony or a spotlight. I just need you. Forever, will you marry me?" Jessa's hand trembled slightly as she reached for the ring. "You should know," she said, voice catching, "that I've never wanted something this much in my entire life." Kellan slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that tasted like home. A year later, they stood beneath an arch of wildflowers in a small garden behind the garage. Zadie wore a white dress and matching sneakers, tossing petals ahead of Jessa as she walked down the aisle. The ceremony was short, surrounded by friends, students, and a few wide-eyed mechanics who'd never seen Kellan wear anything but grease-stained jeans. When the officiant declared them husband and wife, Kellan kissed her like he was claiming the rest of his life. Because he was. That night, they danced beneath strings of lights, laughter echoing across the alley, the air warm with late spring breeze. Zadie spun in circles with Marco, her curls flying, her cheeks flushed with joy. Jessa leaned against Kellan, barefoot now, heels tossed somewhere behind a milk crate. "Do you realize this is where we started?" she asked, glancing at the garage wall. Technically, it was a diner. Still same city, same sky. Very different life, he murmured. But the right one, she said. He kissed her temple, the only one. They didn't need fireworks or a grand exit. Just the sound of music playing, the weight of her hand in his, and the knowledge that they'd built something lasting. A family, a future, a forever that felt exactly right.